Yeah, I guarantee that the rep got his bonus, but
You guys ready? You guys ready? You got everybody in? Everybody in okay? Of course, there's not much to see, nothing to vote on. I had that same thing happen. I had to close it out and go back there.
That page isn't working, so I can go home. It says right
There you
there
go.
on the
That's
screen.
what it said.
No, that didn't work.
It's new in Chrome.
What is,
yours says that page didn't work either.
Yeah, that's what mine did.
So,
The second time I did it, it worked fine. There you go.
there it is, fine.
All righty, I think we're ready to go. So, thanks for coming. We'll get this thing started. So I will call the meeting to order, and let's call roll.
Matthews.
Here.
Ingalls. Here. Frazier. Here. Bolt.
Here.
Rutherford.
Here.
Seahorn.
Here.
Richter. We have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. So we'll get started. Item 1 is receive governing body training from Oklahoma Municipal Assurance Group, OMAG. And looks like Bill Tackett and Dave Weatherford are here.
Mayor, thanks for having us out, and appreciate the opportunity to be in Shawnee, and appreciate y'all's service to the community, and it's good for me to be back in Shawnee. I got to be a part of your organization a long time ago now. Doesn't seem like it should be, but the 90s are receding rapidly, so anyway, we appreciate your service. It's interesting to see the different faces that come to serve and then go on to bigger and better or other things, or smaller and lesser things. OMAG is your insurance company. Some of y'all are new. We are your insurance company, and we are not a private insurer. We're a Title 74 Interlocal Cooperative Act agency. Title 74 is a real simple, powerful law. It says whatever Shawnee can lawfully do by itself, you can find a partner and do it with them. And you guys are one of the examples we use as we go all around the state doing this training, because you guys have an interlocal. Pretty famous. We've made you famous all around the world. If you go over to where they park the RVs, that's an interlocal between Pot County and Shawnee, unless Eric changed it while he was here. So that's an example of an interlocal agreement agency. Now, OMAG got started June 1st of 1977. Choctaw and the Village got us started. From those two towns, we cover 500 cities and towns all in the state of Oklahoma. And since we're not a private company, since we're created by cities and towns, governed by cities and towns, we have a 7-member board of trustees. When you guys get done being city council people, you put a hat on that says Shawnee Public Works Authority and you're a trustee. And so we're created, owned, and governed by cities and towns in Oklahoma. And so as a public entity risk pool, we look for ways to return value to our members. And Shawnee was instrumental in starting an important organization near and dear to my heart, and that's the Oklahoma Municipal Retirement Fund. Bertha Ann was part of that, getting that started all those years ago. And so since we're not a private company and we don't have to pay dividends to some fat cat back in New York City, we get to return value to you all. We do it in a variety of ways. We have things that address loss exposures for sewer backups or public works safety equipment. We have grants for body-worn cameras for your police officers and Lexapol for your policies that are required by state law for police. You can get 1/3 of your required cleat training for your officers, and they never have to leave the city. And as we looked around for the grants and scholarships for mayors and clerks and managers and the Municipal League Conference and all the things that we provide benefits to, we said, what do we do for the folks that sit around the horseshoe? The folks who are the governing body, the people that are the board of directors of this municipal corporation. What do we do for those folks around the state? And there wasn't a lot. When you get newly voluntold or newly elected, you go to newly elected officials training. And that's one time during your tenure, the league puts that on. It's good training. We don't fuss with that. But unlike schools and counties, cities have 5 different forms of government, really 4.5. I count charters as one of the 5. You guys are a council manager form of government. You have a charter. And so you may go to the newly elected official training and hear information that might apply to aldermanic or town form of government or strong mayor. But here we come on site, we bring David Weatherford, our trusted partner for pushing 20 years now, and to bring this training to you all. And so we wanted to bring the training to address the loss exposures that are around the people who are the board of directors of a municipal corporation, who set the policies and the direction for the organization, who allocate resources when you make a budget, and decide the why of the organization. We've done this for a long time. We're really grateful to partner with David Weatherford. David's city attorney, got in the city attorney business along with his private shingle back in 1988. Mary will be able to remember that. That's the year before Taylor Swift was born. So he's been doing it a while. He's currently the city attorney for Oklahoma, Oklahoma, which is over by Fort Smith, Mounds and Manford, which are over around the Tulsa area, and Sand Springs, Oklahoma. So David's got a long tenure as being a city attorney. His work product is what we rely on. We have handouts. We'll take a test here in a minute. These are all his work products as well. So David's in the Hall of Fame for city and town officials, and we're very, very pleased that he's really not a partner anymore. He's part of the LMAG family. And so with that, I'll turn it over to David.
Thanks for having us, and I think we've been here a couple times over the years for training, so good to be back. I think it's always good, and Bill's going to hand out an answer sheet. If you don't have one, it's good for us to take a test, and I'll give you a little bit of background. We got together with a group of experts in the Tulsa area probably 15, 20 years ago and asked, how should we evaluate how we're doing as a city? And so we created a test to do that, and that's what we call the stability test, and we're going to ask you to take it. We're going to ask that you give honest answers as we evaluate each of these 10 areas of government. Don't start filling in answers until I explain what each question is, and then we will get a score, and we'll get a cumulative score back to you so you can help evaluate where you are. The key to the test is to evaluate, not to judge, and really to help us understand how you think as a governing body your city is operating. And Bill, I think if their staff takes it too, that's always helpful. We always want the city manager, city attorney to take the test because they have sometimes a different perspective. So, let's go.
Remember, I didn't do this to you, David. And look over here. She's averting her eyes, but I see her.
I think it's important to get their feedback, and the reason that we think this is important, and we've given this test in a couple of hundred cities, it helps you to evaluate where you are, and if you use it with the idea that we can identify a weakness and we can work on getting better, we will get better at what we do. Bill's given you a book that you can keep. It has all of our materials in it. We're not going to go over all of it, but we're going to go over the test. So let's start with it, and I'm going to ask you to give a score on the finances of the city. A 10 on this test would be a city that has a reserve policy that is in writing, and that is important because a board of directors for an organization should set the financial goals for the city. So you have a written reserve policy that establishes at least 20% of the general fund as a reserve, and you fully fund it. Now, we didn't make that up. That comes from Crawford and Associates, the leading financial advisor for cities in the state, as a best practice for cities. And if you don't know, that's fine. If you don't do it, that's fine. It's taken some cities 100 years to get around to creating a financial reserve policy. But that should be our goal as a board of directors, and believe it or not, you're in a good city in Shawnee that's stable. We had a city in Oklahoma within the last 2 years authorize a resolution for bankruptcy for their public trust. They avoided it at the last minute, but we have a number of cities that are just flat broke. And one way to avoid that is to have a board of directors that sets a policy that establishes what our financial goals are, and that is a part of your job as a member of the board of directors. So that would be a 10. A low score would be, I'm not sure if we can make payroll this time. And we see cities that are in that situation. If you don't know, that's fine. I've had a councilman who raised his hand and said, I have no idea. I've been on council 15 years and I haven't seen a financial report yet. And that's a problem. So we do this training to help you identify what should be a best practice, and that's one of them. So give a score of how you're doing, someplace between 1 and 10 on finances. And again, if it's a low score, your goal should become, how do we get better? What do we do to make it better over the next 6 months, next year, next 5 years? Because the city of Shawnee is going to be around for a long time. And we want good practices over a long period of time. Question number 2 is, how's the governing body? A high score is, we have very good people who want to serve. When we have vacancies, good people want to be a part of it. I am convinced that good city councils attract good people. Bad city councils attract bad people. So a high score is we attract and retain and have very good people who mean well for our city and serve with honor, and it's an important thing to be a part of our city council. A low score is you look around and think, I wish we could throw them all out and start over. And we've been in multiple cities in which everyone sitting in your position is written down at 1. And that's usually a problem, that something's wrong, and they need to do something different. Question number 3 is, how do you rate your meetings? Part of what we do is, in city government is we have public meetings, and we should evaluate how they are. As a member of the board of directors, the meeting process should be enjoyable for both you and your employees. That should be our goal. Should be efficient, getting the information you need, able to make decisions, performing at a high level. Low score is that city in which the meetings are miserable and you wish you'd never had to go to another one. If we're accomplishing that, we're failing. So our goal as a board of directors should be to have good meetings. So give a score on how you think your meetings are. Number 4, what's the workforce like? What's it like to work for the city of Shawnee? Because as a board of director, you should want it to be a good place to work. That's very hard these days. There's a lot of public criticism of public employees. It's hard for them. It's hard to be a city attorney, a city manager, city clerk. All of those jobs are much more difficult than they used to be. And as a board of directors, you've got to recognize that and figure out how we're going to make this a good place to work, because this organization will only be successful if you retain and keep good people who work here. Sometimes that's pay. Most of the time it's working conditions. It's got to be a good place to work. And as a board of directors, that should be a goal for you. So rate the workforce. Is it stable? Do we attract and retain good people? High score is it's a good place to work. We pay well. Low score is that city that just has a revolving door of employees and has a hard time keeping anyone. Part 5, the hardest question on the test. What's the image, public image of the city as an organization? What does the public think about how the city of Shawnee operates? A high score is that city in which there's a high level of confidence that if something goes wrong, the city's able to deal with it. They expect you to be a leader in the region, and they know that you are competent and skilled in what you do in running an organization. It's what the public expects of us. Low score is that city in which there's just no confidence in how the city does its business. So give a score on public image. We can guarantee that statewide this is the lowest score. We're in an era in which there's generally a low opinion of government. Number 6, crisis management. How do we deal with the crisis? Government exists to deal with those things that go wrong, like tornadoes and floods and natural disasters. How well prepared are we to deal with it as an organization? And that usually means we have people in place who can respond, we've set aside resources to deal with it, and we're prepared and ready. So government exists to deal with those things. A high score is we're well prepared, a low score is I don't know what we do in that situation. We haven't been told yet. So how well prepared are we to deal with a crisis? Number 7 is economic development. 30 years ago, this would not have been on the test. 30 years ago, we would have said that's not the city's business. We leave that entirely to the private sector. But cities are much more competitive. The larger cities compete with each other for retail and economic development, for jobs. So the question is, how active is your city in economic development? A high score is you're directly involved, you take an active role, and a low score is you've decided not to. And we've seen every extreme. And it really is a decision that's within the control of the governing body of how active you want to be in trying to change the local economy. Number 8, planning and goal setting. How well do you map out your future? Probably no one's told you yet, but when you decided to be on the city council, one of your number 1 jobs is to decide what you want Shawnee to be someday. Because everyone in town can have an opinion about that, but the group of you get to vote on the things that make that happen. And it is extremely important. So how well, as an organization, have we mapped out where we want Shawnee to go? We've been in a city in which they've never had a planning discussion. They just never get around to it. They're more interested in day-to-day operations, more interested in things that they probably, as a governing body, shouldn't be involved in. But your most important job is to figure out where you want the city to go. So this question is asking, how well are we doing that? How well are we mapping out our future, if at all? And a high score is for those who are doing that well. Question number 9 is how stable is administration, upper management? We know from the private sector that stability in management will have greater results over time than that city that has constant turnover. This is not directed at city managers exclusively, it's upper management of the city. How stable is the management of the city? Because, again, as a board of directors, a goal should be to have stable management so that you can map out a path and accomplish it. Low score is that city that just has constant turnover. Bill and I have been in a city that had 8 city managers in 2 years. Now, they had to work hard to do it, but they did it. 8 in 2 years, and we get to leave town, so I usually, when we run into that situation, I ask, are you that bad at hiring, or is there something else wrong? And it's usually something else is wrong, and they need to deal with it and make it a good place to work, because you should want it to be a stable place for upper management, department head, city manager, city attorney, all of those things. If it's a good place to work, you'll be more successful. We know that from the private sector. And question number 10 is, how well do we communicate as an organization? Are you getting the information you need? Because a lot of places we see there's just a failure to share information and to be open. And it's hard to operate when not everyone's getting the information they need. So a high score is we do that well, I get the information I need to make decisions, and things go well in that way.
So David, how's the scoring work?
The communication, that's staff, commission
Internal.
standpoint, not external.
Internal as an organization. Score, we will get a composite score back to your manager and clerk, and they can look at it and decide what to do with it and get it to you. Again, it should not be for the purposes of judging anyone. It should be for the purposes of evaluating. Where are we and how do we get better?
You'll get a composite score.
They'll get a composite score.
All right.
We think it's important, and I'll give you an example of how we use it in Sand Springs, and it's just an example. There's no one way that's the right way. You guys have put together a very good handbook and gave us a copy beforehand. It's important that you use the handbook and you use the results to work on getting better. We use it in Sand Springs by having a quarterly planning meeting every quarter, a lunch meeting, to talk about one of these 10 topics and how we can get better. We review where our score may be low, and we work on improvement. And it's not, what have you done to make it better, or what should you, manager, do to improve it? What do we as a group need to do to help improve this topic, this area of operations, so we get better at it? And I think if we use it that way, it can be very productive and helpful for us over time. We've tracked our scores over about a 10-year period. I can tell you the statewide average is about a 70. The lowest score we've seen in the last couple of years is a 12, a composite score of a 12 in a city. It should make their insurance company very scared to provide them coverage, right, when they self-evaluate and give themselves a 12 out of 100.
We appreciate honesty there.
And we see very few cities that get above a 90, but there are some. So that's kind of how the test works. Bill, I think we have a lot of written material, and I know you have a meeting following, so I really want to talk some some about how you operate and how OMAG or we can help you, if at all. And Mayor, I know you've been here a while, so you've been doing this for a long time. What do you think about it? How is it being mayor in Shawnee?
You know, I enjoy it. You know, it's like everything, it has its moments, but I really enjoy it. I enjoy being involved, and I mean, I don't know what to say beyond that. I mean, I just really enjoy it.
You have, I assume, a couple of new council members?
We do. I know since, well,
Ms. Frazier?
I know you weren't here last time these guys were here.
No, but I went to them for their training.
Yeah, so, I don't know, Cammie, were you here then?
Probably not.
When they came and did the training?
Last time, I guess Bob was here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a different.
It was before he.
So we've got a couple new ones, and Laura down the end, she's not here right now, but we've got a few new ones.
And several of you have served for a number of years?
Yes, three of us have been here the longest. You guys have been here a little longer than I have.
6 years, I guess.
You're 6, I'm 7.
Fixing to be, yeah,
I'm
fixing
to
s-
be.
I'm 7.5.
Yeah.
For those of you who have served a while, what's the best advice you can give to the new members?
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it is good. It's good to study, communicate with people best you can, and take a play from Mark's playbook and stay out of social media.
That hasn't made it easier, has it?
It's a mess.
Yeah. I think every city has a social media page that's very critical of the city. Almost every city we've been to some in which they were filming while we were there and commenting while we were there, usually about us. So there's a lot of that. I hope none of the elected officials are running the I Hate the City page. We've seen that in some places. Usually that doesn't last long once they start serving on council, but that has happened where the person who's in charge of that gets elected or appointed and figures out there's another side to the story. Staying off social media probably makes life a little bit easier, doesn't it?
No doubt.
You know, I had a board member ask me recently or make this comment. I didn't know I would get criticized for this job.
Oh, my goodness.
You're going to get criticized for this job, aren't you? From someplace, because
Without a doubt.
you're in a position in which you have to make decisions, and we know from having conducted surveys of elected officials over the years, you are going to make a decision, usually about land use, zoning, annexation, something land use related, that will be very unpopular. Those are the hardest decisions you will have for the new members. Historically, it just has been. Land use decisions, and we're in an era in which there's someone on each side of every land use decision, it seems. No matter what you do, you're going to make someone mad, and it is one of those decisions in which staff can't make it for you. You've got to decide it. Whether it's a zoning change or whatever it may be, it's going to be your decision, and someone's not going to like it. So, Ms. Frazier, what prompted you to want to serve?
Hey, it was an open job. Yeah. Well, I've just lived here my whole life and lived downtown in particularly 30 years now, and just started attending meetings. I'd been involved with tribal politics forever, and that's where I'd been focused. And I started getting to meetings. That was
Good.
it. I just kind of see.
Good. Hopefully you find a way for it to be an enjoyable experience, because it should be. Serving on the city council should be enjoyable, and if there's one thing as a city attorney and a staff member that I thought is always important for our staff is that we work toward that. Because if it's not, we're going to have a revolving door amongst your group, and that's not always good for the city. We need stability in city council over time, because the history of how we got to this point and why these decisions were made this way becomes important. Ms. Ingalls, you're fairly new also. Has it been an enjoyable experience?
Yeah, I'm definitely being able to be a part of some, what I consider some historic movement forward, and stabilization of infrastructure and these big items that were important to the city's long-term success. It's been cool to be a part of that stuff with these guys.
Good. That's the important work, isn't it? To map out that long-range future of the city. Because a lot of times we see some who want to get involved because they're more interested in the day-to-day operations, the personnel decisions, all of the hard work that you hire someone to do. And you really should be focused on just that issue, the long-term, what do we hope to accomplish as an organization, where are we going as a city, so that you can be in a position to accomplish those things. Mr. Matthews, you've been several years now.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about the process?
I think my favorite part, and I would say what is probably best for newer commissioners, is I really enjoy the planning process, from strategic planning to master plans to capital improvement plans, because it provides a map. We don't have to reinvent or solve everything with every issue. We've kind of set a course, and it also, in my thinking, gives me a backstop or bumpers of, okay, we set the course, or the course was set for us. How does this align with, does it fit in between the rails that, because most of those plans have a lot of community input, and so does it fit within the rails of where we said we were headed? And if it doesn't, why not? Is it a needed change, or have we drifted? And so I enjoy that kind of look and filter for
Good.
it. So,
That's the important work. It really is, and it's good that you're focused on that. City Attorney, what are your thoughts as a group, how we're operating? Anything that stands out that either good or bad, that, boy, when we look at it, I wish we could move this way, or they're really doing a good job this way?
I think this group particularly absorbs a lot of information, and they're very forthcoming in requesting information. And then likewise, that was my kiss up because they hire and fire me. This is not a kiss up because the manager does not, but I think the manager does an excellent job of having staff respond to those requests.
Yeah.
And in my time being involved with different commissioners, different managers, that combination over the last 2.5, 3 years has been very effective, not only for this group and for staff, but for the general public to get that information.
Yeah, great point, because when we get to the point that everyone is working well together as an organization, staff and council are all on the same page, pulling in the same direction, your job, like mine, gets much easier, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure.
It just is, because we did a survey once of city managers at a city managers conference. What's the hardest problem for a city manager to deal with? And it's not budget, it's not land use, it is conflict amongst council. By far, it's the hardest issue for a city manager to deal with. Well, guess what? She shouldn't have to deal with that, and you shouldn't have to deal with it. The group of you should resolve that, and if you do that well, the rest of what we do gets a lot easier, doesn't it? We can focus on just what Mr. Matthews talked about. We can focus on having a good comprehensive plan and long-range plans and how to implement that, rather than the nonsense we sometimes deal with. So good. Now, great answer. It's good to hear that it's moving in that direction and working that way. How do they sustain it? That's the hard part, right?
Well, you know, I mean, it's on both sides of the coin.
It is.
Because those requests don't materialize themselves, but by requesting that information, I think that enables this group to take that data and resolve those conflicts, or at least have cognizant arguments as to why one side or the other is more correct.
Right.
But by sharing it with a larger group, I think it gives everyone, including the public, the ability to form more complete opinions, because obviously we see a lot more than the general public normally would.
Yeah. And sometimes some of them are going to be in the minority in a vote, and they've got to learn to accept it and go on. Life goes on. That's just going to happen. But it can't be personal. It's the way it is. That's why there's 7 of you instead of 1. There are going to be differences of opinion. The challenge is how we deal with that difference of opinion and work through it and find a way to work well together and move past that. Part of the reason I created this training years ago was a very selfish motive. I got very tired of being in cities in which there's constant conflict. I once attended a meeting and there was a 3-2 vote on whether we should adjourn after a long argument about whether we should adjourn. And there was nothing else left on the agenda other than adjourning. And fortunately, 3 had voted in favor of adjourning, or we might still be there. But I went 2 years in a city in which there was a 3-2 vote on every single agenda item for 2 years. Every agenda item for 2 years. We're not very productive when that happens. This is, the public sometimes wants you to be at odds with each other, but your goal should be just what your city attorney said, was find a way that all of the council and all of the staff are working, pulling in the same direction, and if we do that well, we will do better work. We know that. And there are pressures not to operate that way, but it does get the better results for the public. Over time, it just will. Andrea, you've been here a couple of years.
I have, and I can say this, having said that quietly, while the city commission could not hear it, but this is by far the best city commission and city council I've worked with, by virtue of very different backgrounds and perspectives, but all coming to the table with a desire to work together and find a pathway forward. Also being focused on long-term goals rather than just the immediate what's in front of us, which allowed us to make those big decisions on water treatment plant and wastewater treatment plant and move those very big, once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generation projects forward. So excellent city commission, not necessarily always of the same mind, but always willing to work together.
Good. How do you sustain that and keep it going? That's the challenge, isn't it?
That was one of the things that previous assistant city manager, current assistant city manager, and I are keenly aware of. The more information we can pass on to the city commission to help them understand this decision will cause X, Y, and Z versus this decision will have these consequences. So the more information we can get to the city commission ahead of having to make a vote, the better the decision-making process.
And it's always got to be a team effort. It's not you against them or them against you, or the way we see in some cities, it's the commission against the staff or whatever. It just never works. We're all in this together. How do we find a way to make it work? Bill, what do you want to cover? You've got a few minutes? And you usually will have something to say. Because Bill's been to a couple hundred cities too. Worked here a decade or 2 or 3 ago.
Easy now, come on. Well, we appreciate you all having us out, and, you know, OMAG engages in this training because we have a selfish motive. We think the best-run cities and towns have fewer claims, and the claims that you do have cost less money to resolve. Pretty simple. And so the things that cost us money, us being y'all, because you all are part of OMAG, are what we call the 3 Ps. And the 3 Ps are personnel. When you have an adverse personnel action, people get cranky sometimes. And police, you know, if you ride the lightning, get hit with the stick, or go to the gray bar inn, usually you get cranky and you might want to sue. And the third one's poo. You know, that stuff comes up instead of goes down, people get cranky about that. And so those are the kind of things that staff deals with. But where do they get the resources and the guidance? That comes from you all. Now, I know you all don't put the green eyes shade on and make the budget numbers dance like Jim used to do back in the day. But you all are still the ones that set a strategic direction for the organization, and hopefully you do that with the big picture in mind, and I know you do. It's interesting to be standing here in front of you, and I think probably West Watkins Lake is probably paid for by now. I remember going out there with Terry Powell and the other guys, and walking around on the bottom of it while it was dry dirt. But because Pierre's brother wanted to lead that charge, now we have extra water here in Shawnee all these years later. So you're talking about historic things and long-term things and the goals that are over the horizon, over the horizon. We don't have anyone that writes a business book for public sector, and if they do, it's usually for nonprofits, and that's not real helpful for municipal operations, so we steal business books from the private sector. Our favorite guy is Simon Sinek, and about 3 years ago he came out with The Infinite Game. It's a good book, you should read it, it's easy to read. He got famous with Start With Why, and Simon says that everybody knows what they do. A lot of folks know how they do it, but not a lot of organizations know why they exist. And you have to find your why. And if you don't know your why, then you don't know your direction. Why does your organization exist? And so, based on Simon's writing and teaching, a very trusted advisor came up with a universal why for cities and towns. A person I find to be really knowledgeable and have a lot of gravitas in this area. And that person said that a city or town's why do you exist, what's your purpose, is to create the kind of community that attracts quality individuals who want to live and work and raise their families here. They don't want to live in Edmond and work here. They want to raise their families here, they want to live here. And your why, the center of your bullseye on your target, is the less concrete thing. But if you can identify your why, how are you going to go about creating the kind of community that attracts quality individuals who want to live and work and raise their families here, then you'll do the things that on a long-term basis will create that kind of success. And those things go along with your 2 whats. Every city has 2 whats. Simon has what, how, and why. And every city has 2 whats. Those are your 2 missions, and they're ancient. They're the same reasons people clumped up thousands of years ago. People got together in groups thousands of years ago for 2 reasons. And I don't know anything new. All of my stuff is old or stolen or both. I don't have an original thought in my head. I just go around and steal other people's ideas. People clumped up originally to be safe. Safe from other folks, safe from animals, so one of your 2 whats is to increase public safety. That's not just police and fire. Are your public spaces safe, well-lit, attractive, inviting? Right? Can your emergency vehicles get up and down the streets? Increase public safety. How's your potable water? How do you treat your wastewater? How do you treat your solid waste? It's not just police and fire. So one of your whats is, one of your missions is to increase public safety. And the second is the other reason people pumped up all those years ago, and that was to trade with each other. You have this, I got that, let's make a deal. And since we're the only state in the union that runs off sales tax and not property tax for cities and towns, we have to be engaged in economic development. And so we do that by all the things that we do in public. We're fortunate here that we have I-40 running along, toting a lot of folks back and forth across our town, and so that helps economic development. David and I go a lot of places, and good roads are scarce, and it's tough out there. So if you'll keep those things in your mind as you make your big decisions, I'm sure you will. What is your why? What are your 2 missions? Increase public safety, facilitate commerce. And then you'll craft your decisions for the long term by, will this advance the idea that we're creating the kind of community that attracts quality individuals who want to live and work and raise their families here? If you do that, then you'll do the only permanent work that you guys will do. The only permanent work you'll do. It's not the buildings that you build, it's the culture you build. It's the culture you build. So the culture will outlast all of us. Simon says we're only in this part of the game for a small period of time. The Shawnee movie was running when we got here. Started a long time ago. Unless we really mess it up, it'll be running a long time from now. What are we going to do during our little part of it to make it sustainable, to build that kind of culture that winning organizations have? So that's why OMAG cares about providing this kind of training for the people that are the board of directors of this municipal corporation, so that you exercise fully your duties of care, obedience, and loyalty. You make good use of your resources, time, money, and people, and that you do your job well to set a strategic direction for the organization, adopt the policies that help staff take you along there, and then monitor results. So we appreciate your service, and we appreciate your care for your community, appreciate the opportunity to be back in front of the horseshoe here after all these years. Any other questions for David? This would also be the time for complaints.
Questions or complaints?
I don't want to interrupt. I've been getting messages from the outside world. Lisa, Broadway, are you aware of issues there? Yes. Any staff involved, everything good? No one was injured? Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right. Any questions of us?
Questions or complaints?
Or complaints? Those are for Bill. We appreciate you allowing us to take some of your time. We've seen that there are some cities around the state that have been extremely successful over a long period of time, and I don't think it's by accident. I think it's by design. So we appreciate your time, and it sounds like you've got, sure.
I just have one thing that is kind of on my mind. Upcoming elections, people are running for these seats, and a common misconception is what our job is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And until that's clarified, and I think maybe from outside it would carry more weight, because we try to convey that, and a lot of people, I've had people come to me lately and go, well, the mayor did this, the mayor did that. It's like, he doesn't have that authority. And people just don't understand a lot of how it works. And
even less understanding these days. It's much more difficult. I think the best description of your job is that you are the board of directors for a municipal corporation, and you should operate as a board of directors, which means you set long-range policy and goals for the organization, and you hire people to handle the day-to-day management and the day-to-day operations. You set policies about spending authority, and you've given your manager a lot of spending authority, which is consistent with other cities this size. And by statute, you're precluded from being involved in some things, like day-to-day operations and personnel. And it's none of your business. And I didn't cover that probably as bluntly as I do some places, but you will at some point, especially those of you who are new, you will at some point get a complaint from a citizen that employee so-and-so was either fired or disciplined by the city, and you're going to go to the manager or the attorney and say, boy, I got this complaint from a citizen, what are you going to do about it? And I hope they're able to give you the answer that is the honest answer that they should. I wish I could tell you, but it's none of your business.
Yep.
Because it's none of your business.
Yep.
By law, it is none of your business. Now, most managers and attorneys won't tell you that. They will say, I wish I could. But there are so many restrictions on personnel issues and employment issues. It is very difficult to get much information to you, and it should be. And from your standpoint, why in the world do you want to be involved in that?
No.
You shouldn't. So if someone is running for office to decide who gets hired and fired around here, they're running for the wrong job. They should apply to be a city manager or an HR director or something like that, because that's not your job. The legislature has said it's not your job. Your voters have said it's not your job when they approved a charter. So there are lots of impediments to that being your job, and you shouldn't want it to be. So no, hopefully that answers it some.
A lot of people do understand. There's just some that
don't.
And that's one of the most common ones is HR. We get questions, and it's like, I don't know. Why don't you know? I don't want to know.
shouldn't know.
Shouldn't know. And it's just,
Yeah, some
That's
things are
very
just none of our business. In my job as city attorney, some things are none of my business. And I hope the manager will tell me, that's not your business, stay out of it. Sometimes that happens, and that's fine. It's what should happen. I don't know, you two have a different take on it? I don't.
I can answer for them.
Yeah. I mean, it just makes our jobs harder if, you can't make personnel decisions with a board. I mean, and they can't give you all the information you need to know. I mean, we've had that, a similar question, maybe little Johnny flunked a drug test and we shouldn't maybe make that public, right? Right. There are restrictions, on what can be released. And, I don't know, we did a survey of elected officials once and asked, what advice would you give newly elected officials? And it was an interesting piece of advice. You were gonna get the call from the person who's tried to get something at City Hall and never been able to, because they start over with the new people. And there's a reason they haven't been able to get something at City Hall, because it's not the right answer. But they always go to the next new person to try to get the same thing. And I think that was an interesting answer from someone serving just like the group of you. Bill, you want to contradict my answer? Or add to it?
No, I can't. I wish I could. I'd like to, but I can't. You know, it's hard, you know, a long time ago when David would tie his dinosaur up in front of middle school, called junior high school back then, they would teach you one semester in 8th grade of Oklahoma history. And that consisted of which governor got impeached and went to jail when. That's how that thing worked. There's nowhere that teaches you how municipal government works, and it's the one that touches your life every week.
Closer than any other level.
It's close. It's right here.
Yep.
And there's technically 4, but I call it 5 different forms of municipal government. And if all you know is, you know, the mayor of Chicago is in charge of this, or the mayor of Los Angeles is in charge of that, or the mayor of New York City, well, of course they're going to say, well, why didn't the mayor do this or that? That's all they see on the news. They don't understand the history of the fact that progressives back in the late 1800s were tired of Jacksonian patronage and wanted merit-based systems in the federal government, and so out of that grew this form of government for cities and towns about 100 years ago. It's not taught. People don't know. And really, the only interaction most folks have with City Hall is you come here to get your utilities turned on, or God forbid you get a parking ticket or something, but that's about it. So really, you know, part of your job is creating that culture. Part of that culture is educating the public, and most of them are busy and don't want to be educated because they're raising families and fishing and doing things that are important to them. But it's hard. And it makes it harder when new people come on, especially if you don't have a background for how this works. But we're out of time. Thank you guys so much for allowing us back. And
Yeah, thank you
we
guys
appreciate that.
very much for coming. Anybody got anything else for adjourn? All right, with that, we are adjourned.